Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. We are from Group 5, Third A Accounting. Our group consists of Muhammad Fadli, Dinda Alfani, Rasendriya, and myself, Artika. In here, we are making this presentation to fulfill the assignment for this cost accounting class. Nah, in this nice occasion, we will talk about factory overhead, plan, actual, and apply. So, we are hoping that you can follow our presentation for our discussion later. There are our materials. First, define factory overhead and its components. Second, defining and calculating overhead rates. Third, accumulating actual factory overhead costs. 4. Charge applying factory overhead based on predetermined rates. And last, determining over or under apply the factory overhead. Nah, the first material will be presented by Reyes. So Reyes, time is yours.
I would like to explain about the definition. Definition: factory overhead is defined as indirect materials, indirect labor, and all other planned costs that cannot be easily charged directly to a specific order, product, or other cost object. Factory overhead has two characteristics. Firstly, characteristic relating to the relationship between factory overheads and products or production volume. Unlike direct raw materials and direct labor, overhead is an invisible part of finished product. There is no evidence of demand for raw materials or employee working hours indicating the amount of overhead used for a product order. The second characteristic relates to how those items that differ in overhead change against changes in production volumes. In other words, fixed overhead costs per unit of output vary in reverse with the volume of production. The variable overhead per unit of output is constant. Semi-variable overhead costs are neither entirely fixed or not variable. The amount changes but is not proportional to the change in the volume of production. Thank you, and back to moderator.
Alright, the second material will be presented by Kayla. To Kayla, time is yours.
Basis for charging factory overhead. Basis for charging factory overhead. First, the factor measured as the denominator of the overhead rate is referred to as basis of the overhead tariff. The basis of allocation of overhead or the basis. Second, the objective in the basis selection or A. To ensure the charge of overhead in reasonable proportion to the indirect plan resource used all orders, products, or work performed. For example, if the overhead is mostly oriented toward raw materials and is dominated by the cost or purchase and handling raw materials, then the cost raw of materials is suitable for use as the basis for loading. B. To minimize cost and clerical effort. When two or more loading bays produce about the same amount of factory overhead for each order or product, then it's the simple and easiest loading base that should be used. Third, actual overhead costs. 1. Cycle output or production unit. A production unit, the simple basis for charging factory overhead. Its use is illustrated as follows: estimate factory overhead or estimate product unit equal factory overhead per unit. If the factory overhead at Mamo Furniture is estimated 300.000 and the company intend to produce 250 unit during the coming period, each complete unit will be changed on an overhead 300.000 dibagi 250 unit, yaitu 1.200. An order with 10 unit complete will be charged an overhead fee 10 dikali 1.200 yaitu 12.000.
The next material will be presented by Fadli. To Fadli, time is yours.
Number 2. Basic direct material cost. It is calculated by dividing the estimate total overhead by the estimate total cost of direct raw materials. Estimate factory overhead or estimate raw material cost times 100 equal factory overhead as a percentage of direct raw material cost. If the estimate total factory overhead is 300 rupiah and the estimate cost of raw material total 250 rupiah, then each order or product is charged factory overhead equivalent to 300 rupiah by 250 rupiah equal 1.2 or 120% of the direct raw materials. For example, if the raw material for an order is 15 rupiah, then the order receives an additional fee of 15 rupiah times 120% equal 16 rupiah for factory overhead. And then number 3, basic cost of direct solar energy. Using a direct labor cost basis to charge factory overhead to an order or product requires that the overhead estimate is divided by the direct labor cost estimate to calculate a percentage. Estimate factory overhead or estimate direct labor cost times 100 equal factory overhead as a percentage of direct labor cost. If the estimate factory overhead costs are 300 rupiah and the total direct labor costs for the upcoming period are estimated 500 rupiah, then the factory overhead is 300 rupiah by 500 equal 0.6 or 60%. An order or product with a direct labor cost of 20,000 rupiah will be charged an overhead fee of 20,000 rupiah times 60% equal 7,200 rupiah.
And the last material will be presented by myself. Okay. 4. Basic hours of direct labor. The direct labor hour basis is designed to address the second drawback of the basic use of direct labor costs. Factory overhead rates based on direct labor hours are calculated as follows. Factory overhead estimation per estimated hours of direct labor equal factory overhead per direct labor hour. So, if the estimated total factory overhead is 3 juta rupiah and the total hours of direct labor is estimated 60.000 rupiah, then the factory overhead rate is 3 juta dibagi 60.000 sama dengan 50 rupiah per hour on direct labor. An order or product that requires 800 hours of direct labor will be charged factory overhead of 800 jam dikali 50 rupiah sama dengan 40.000. And next, Fifth, basic of the machine clock. When the machine is used extensively, then the engine clock may be the most suitable basis for overhead loading. So, the formula is factory overhead estimation per estimated machine hours equal factory overhead per machine hour. So, if the total factory overhead is estimated at 3 juta rupiah and the total machine hours are estimated at 20.000 rupiah, then the factory overhead rate is 3 juta rupiah dibagi 20.000 rupiah sama dengan 150 per machine hour on order or product that uses 120 hours of machinery is charged factory overhead of 120 dikali 150 rupiah sama dengan 18.000. And the last material is accumulation of actual overhead costs. There are two ways of accumulation actual overhead costs. First, determine the basis and the level of activity, estimate the total overhead, and calculate the overhead rate occurring before actual cost occur or is recorded. Factory overhead can be charged weekly or monthly as soon as the necessary data is available, such as predetermined rates and actual machine hours. But on a daily basis, some actual factory overhead costs are recorded as they occur at the time the transaction is journal and post to the ledger or auxiliary book. And secondly, the main source documents used to record overhead in the journal are purchase vouchers, proof of raw material requests, working hour cards, and general journal vouchers. So I think that's the material we can explain. I apologize if there are word mistakes or there is still a lack of material that we can explain. We are very open if there is additional material that you want to add or any question you want to ask. I think that's all about our presentation. Thank you for your listening. May all those we have shared be beneficial for all of us. Thank you so much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.